For the past 25 years, I've been translating. I don't do research. I work with neuroscientists, brain researchers, and as a teacher, I was concerned that we were teaching kids brains and we didn't understand their brains. We didn't know how brains worked. So I began to look at some of the research, began to talk to some brain researchers. And so what I have been doing up until recently was talking to teachers and occasionally parents about how kids learn and what we need to be doing in classrooms. And then I got older and older and older, and I began to look at a new vein of research. And that's what does the research say about the aging brain. And I started this at 75. I'm 81 now. And I've been doing this workshop every chance I get because I, like many people, are worried about getting Alzheimer's. And I'm going to show you the numbers. It's unbelievable how many people, in fact, half of the people in the United States over the age of 85 have Alzheimer's. So of course we worry about it. I mean, have any of you been introduced to someone and 5 minutes later can't remember the person's name? Mm-hmm. Has anyone come out of the grocery store and can't remember where you parked your car? Or like me, have you looked for your keys for 10 minutes and found them in your hand? I mean, you know. Well, none of those are signs of Alzheimer's, okay? But we do need, and as you're going to see, there is no cure for Alzheimer's at this point, although there's a tremendous amount of research going on. But there are things that we can do to delay its onset. So that's what we want to talk about tonight. Let's first talk just a little bit about the aging brain. Here are some physical changes that take place in our brains as we get older, and they start around 30, believe it or not. So you start aging at 30. Now, I didn't feel aged at 30, but the brain begins to change. Some of the changes are, your brain begins to shrink a little bit. It's okay. It does get smaller as you get older. Your arteries that carry blood to the brain lose some of their elasticity. All right, they don't work quite as well as they did. Capillaries that come off of the arteries decrease in number. All of these things happen from 30 on. And the blood flow to the brain decreases a little bit as well. Now, those are normal kinds of things that happen in all of our brains. So I want you to take a look. This is a 75-year-old woman. This is a CAT scan. And if you look very carefully, you can see the changes that have taken place. Do you see the little space? Let me see if this is going to work. Do you see this space right here? This is the skull. This is the brain. Those are cavities in her teeth, okay? So don't worry about those. So do you see how this 75-year-old woman's brain has shrunk? Not a lot, but it doesn't go clear to the skull like it used to. Tell me what you think this woman is experiencing. Short-term memory loss? Any other ideas? She's 75. Her brain has shrunk. Any other ideas about what she might be experiencing?
It takes longer to process.
Longer to process, longer to find things. All right. Has some trouble with remembering names or movies or books or authors. Okay. Well, this is my brain. Okay. A few years ago, I began to have some headaches, and because my husband had died of a brain tumor, I'm a little concerned about headaches. So I went into the doctor. It turned out to be allergies, okay? But in the process of figuring out what it was, they did a scan. So now I can show you a scan of a brain and show you that, yes, my brain has shrunk. Now that was 6 years ago, all right? And it's probably shrunk a little bit more. What this is called is AAMI. age-associated memory impairment. All right. It is not a sign of Alzheimer's. It's a relatively small cognitive loss. I have to search a little bit longer to find things in my brain, okay? Can't remember the name of a movie that I saw 2 weeks ago. Comes to me a few days later. Can't remember the author of a book, or remember the author and don't remember the name of the book. These are things that happen to all of us. Part of it is because you've got a lot more in your brain, all right? It takes longer to find it. This is what everyone will experience as you get older. AAMI, age-associated memory loss, not a problem, not a problem. So here's the picture. If you take a look at this, across the bottom is age, all right? So this is normal aging. And then this is called mild cognitive impairment. This is a stage up or down, from the age-associated memory, from AAMI. Many people are diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, MCI. It often does lead to Alzheimer's, but not always. The older you get, see, we're going along this, the older you get, the more chance you have of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. It's probably a good idea to distinguish between dementia and Alzheimer's disease, all right? So, dementia refers to the severity of the cognitive dysfunction. And there's two completely different dimensions. So, both MCI, mild cognitive impairment, which a lot of people have, all right, and dementia, you have abnormal scores on tests. And I'll show you the tests that they give people to see if they think they might have Alzheimer's or not. A patient with dementia has an impact on daily function. So they may have trouble getting dressed, they may have trouble feeding themselves, they may have remembering their kids' names, dates, all kinds of things. But they have problems during the day functioning, all right? A patient with MCI does not. MCI is cognitive problems. Dementia is you have trouble getting through the day. You may need assistance. Right. So both of them are abnormal, and MCI often leads to dementia. Now there's other forms of dementia. You can have vascular dementia. That's a stroke. You can have a mild stroke, and depending on where the stroke is in the brain, you can have some cognitive problems. You can have memory problems. Lewy body's disease. This is what Robin Williams learned he had, and probably why he committed suicide. It leads to very severe dementia, and he'd evidently, according to news reports out from his wife, was really beginning to suffer the forms of dementia. All right, it's a disease. It's not Alzheimer's, but the daily actions are going to be the same as Alzheimer's. He was beginning to have trouble, she says, remembering things. He knew he had this. He knew it was going to get worse. He knew he couldn't function. And on top of that, he had depression. All right. Frontal temporal. These are your frontal lobes, okay? And there's a form, sometimes a tumor. Sometimes a very severe bang on the head can cause dementia, and that's not Alzheimer's. AIDS, people with AIDS often have a form of dementia caused by the disease. But Alzheimer's accounts for 2/3 of all dementia. So it's the one we're the most concerned with. Your chances of getting any of those others are very slight. Chances of getting Alzheimer's are high in our population, and we'll see why. So the numbers. Right now, 5 million Americans have Alzheimer's. And this is beginning to be a real health problem and a very expensive problem because what's happening is medical science is doing a great job of keeping our bodies alive longer. If you had lived back when our ancestors lived in caves or on the savannas, do you know what the average lifespan was? It was between 25 and 30. You didn't have any Alzheimer's. People didn't live long enough to get it. But look at our society. We are an aging culture. Medical science is doing a great job of keeping us alive longer, and we're doing a lousy job of keeping our brains alive as long as our bodies. So the numbers are just increasing and increasing and increasing, the number of people with Alzheimer's. 10% of people over the age of 65 have Alzheimer's. 30 to 50% of those aged 80 to 90. Now, do you want to hear the good news? If you reach 90 without getting Alzheimer's, you won't get it. So I figured just 9 more years. That's all I've got to go. Well, really interesting. If you reach the age of 90 and don't have Alzheimer's, no one gets it after age 90. Nobody knows why either. It is the 6th leading cause of death in the U.S. today. This is a serious problem. Why do you think almost 2/3 of the people with Alzheimer's are women? They live longer. Yeah. Doesn't appear to be a gender kind of thing. Women just live longer. So 2/3 of the people with Alzheimer's. And it is costing the nation right now $203 billion a year. And the cost will only increase as the number of people with Alzheimer's increase. Is there a cure? No. In fact, you don't even know if someone has Alzheimer's until after they die. Now, you have a pretty good idea, but the definitive definition I'll show you. The researchers have to take a real thin slice of brain and put it under a microscope, and I'll show you what they look for to see if the person has Alzheimer's or not. But you cannot definitively define it except through autopsy. Okay? So, to understand what we might do to keep from getting it, we first need to take a look at a brain. This is an autopsy brain. This is an actual photograph of a real brain. But at the moment of death, all of the fluids and all of the blood drains out of the brain. So this is not terribly helpful, okay? You don't know whether this is a male brain or a female brain. You don't know if this person has Alzheimer's or not. You don't know if this person has attention deficit disorder, or you really can't tell anything much from an autopsy brain unless you slice it in really thin slices, put it under a high-powered microscope and take a look at it, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now, this is important, and I'll try not to get too technical with this one. The way we learn and the way we remember, in fact, the way we do anything responsible for our ability to talk, to walk, to sing, to do everything we do, is controlled by brain cells. And you have 100 billion of these brain cells. They're called neurons, all right? And they talk to each other with electrical and chemical signals. They are responsible for everything a human can do. Those brain cells are responsible for your memory, for your walking, for your singing. Anything you can do is controlled by these cells up here in your brain. Now, you've got 100 billion of them. That's a lot. And they're very small. 30,000 of them would fit on the head of a pin. Now, this is a cartoon drawing of brain cells. And they have these fingers on them called dendrites. So one brain cell connects to another brain cell, except they don't touch. In between the fingers from one cell to another is a tiny little space, and it's called a synapse. Have you heard that term? Synapse. And chemicals flow across that synapse. So when you think of something, or see something or hear something, an electrical impulse starts up in this cell. So it'll start up right here. It'll travel down a long branch, and then it'll have a synapse on these little fingers on another cell. Right now, your cells are firing about 1 million times a second. It's what's allowing you to see me, to hear me talk, to be aware of what the clothes on your body, that you're sitting in a chair, that you're thinking. This is what's responsible, all right? So these brain cells are talking to each other. Thank goodness we're not aware of it. You know, you don't want to feel those million cells right now. But the amount of activity that is taking place in your brain is unbelievable. But it's unconscious, all right? Oops. Now, this is one of my favorite slides. This is a slice of brain tissue from a newborn. The baby died or we wouldn't have it, all right? And under a high-powered microscope, you can see the brain cells. See, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 brain cells in that slice of tissue. This one is a 2-year-old. Now, how is it different? Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. It's very different. When you learn something, you sprout new connections. Learning is a matter of sprouting new connections. And if you use those connections over and over, you get a really strong connection, and we call that memory. Now, how many of you took a foreign language in high school? How many of you speak it fluently today? 1. Why? What happened to all those connections? Well, this is a use it or lose it brain, okay? So, the first time you learn something, you get a chemical. Have you heard of dopamine and serotonin and endorphins? Those are chemicals in your brain. So, first time, I'm going to learn the word for duck in Spanish, and it's pato, okay? And that'll make a connection, and it'll take X amount of some chemical to make that connection. If I keep saying that over and over, then next time it takes less chemical, and the connection gets stronger and stronger and stronger. But when I left that Spanish class and never used it again, what do you think the brain did with that connection? Got rid of it. Said, you're not using this one. You're just crowding up the brain with something you're not using. So it prunes away the connection. So learning and memory is a matter of making connections and pruning away the ones you don't use, all right? This 2-year-old right here has too many connections. It's called the terrible twos. I'm serious. Now what the brain's going to do at age 2 in a child, it's going to start getting rid of connections that child does not need anymore. As the child learns more language and learns to speak well, you get rid of the da-da mama, all right? And you get rid of things that you thought were true, you find out are not true as you reach 2. What they don't tell you is the terrible 2s become the terrible 3s, you know? And then they become the fearsome 4s. And it isn't until about 5 that the brain begins to settle down a little bit, which is probably why we start school around 5. Okay. However, never again will you learn as much as that baby learned in the first 5 years. It is busy, growing connections and pruning connections away. Okay, before I show you what happens in Alzheimer's, will you turn to the person next to you and tell them what in the brain is going on when you learn something, and why do you remember it or not remember it later? Okay, just turn to the person. Now, of course, there's 3 of you at a table, so you can have triads. Okay, why did I just ask you to do that? What are you doing? You just strengthened your synapses. You just increased the probability that you'll remember the information. Now, I could say instead of having you do that, I can say, now, do you all understand what I'm saying? And everybody goes, are there any questions? And all that tells me is that your neck muscles are okay, okay? But I know from experience that when you teach something to someone else, you strengthen your own memory of it. Okay, now I will ask, are there any questions up to this point? And that's not really a very good question because people don't want to raise their hand and say, I didn't understand, right? But if you turn to the person next to you, that's pretty safe. And you tell them what you learned. So you just strengthened your synapses. All right. All right, so now here we have, these are healthy cells. All right, and you can see the connections. These are Alzheimer's cells. And what has happened is there's a protein that the brain has naturally, but all of a sudden you get too much of it. It's called beta amyloid. And the researchers are going crazy trying to figure out why it does that. And what it does is it makes little masses here on the connections. What do you think is going to happen to those connections with all of that plaque? It'll obstruct them. It actually makes them go away. Now this next one, next slide, oops. I want to come back to that one. I want to show this one. All right, this is an actual photograph of a brain cell. Now, when you know that 30,000 of them fit on the head of a pen, this is greatly magnified. On this side, this is a healthy brain cell. Look at the connections. You have 100 billion brain cells, and each brain cell has around 6,000 to 10,000 connections on it, meaning that one cell can connect to 6,000 or 10,000 other cells. It's an amazing brain. It really is. However, here's your healthy neuron. This one had all of the beta amyloid, and look at it. What has happened? The connections are gone. So if your memory is contained in synapses, as it is, all right, and the more you rehearse that, the stronger the memory. But this plaque, these plaques and tangles, cause this to happen. Now what's going to happen? You don't have anything to connect to. Let me show you. Let me go back now and show you. So there's plaques and there's tangles, and this is greatly magnified. This is from an autopsy brain of a person with Alzheimer's. And you can see those little globs of protein. And you can see they're tangles. You have to have both of these for a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And what they do is they take this sliced brain tissue, and some poor lab assistant sits and counts how many of these plaques and how many of these tangles you have in your brain. And they will say, okay, this person didn't have any plaques and tangles, they didn't have Alzheimer's. This one had a few, we'll call them stage 1. This one had a few more, stage 2. So they categorize the brains from 0 to 6. A stage 6 is a worst case scenario, all kinds of plaques and tangles. Remember that, we're going to need that in a little while. Okay. Now what happens when you begin to lose connections? You really begin to lose the substance of the brain. And this, of course, is advanced Alzheimer's on the right and a normal brain on the left. Now, some of these brain cells that you're losing control speech. Some of them control movement. Some of them control vision. Some of them control hearing. But some of them control your heartbeat and your lung function. So this is why people die of Alzheimer's, when they lose the connections that allow them to, the heart to beat normally or the lungs to process oxygen. All right. Okay, what are the risk factors? Normal aging is a risk factor. All right. So as we get older, our risk increases. Genetics. If you have a first-degree relative, that's a mother, father, sister, or brother, with Alzheimer's, your risk is increased. It does not mean you're going to get Alzheimer's, but you have a higher risk if you have a first-degree relative. Now, some forms of Alzheimer's are genetic, and there's one called early onset. And these are people who get Alzheimer's in their 40s. That appears to be controlled mostly by genes. All right. How many of you saw the movie Still Alice or read the book? Yeah. See, now, I'm doing it right now. I can't think of the actress. Thank you. Jeez. Julianne Moore played a professor, a brilliant person, who had early onset Alzheimer's in her late 40s, early 50s. And this is a genetic type. You don't see an awful lot of it. I do have one friend who died of Alzheimer's at 51, right? That's highly, highly unusual, and I'm going to guess most of you are safe on that one. Significant prior head trauma. I am really concerned, and I'm glad that the coaches are getting concerned about football, all right? Because if you've had significant head trauma, that increases your risk of Alzheimer's. And I think the same thing would hold true for soccer, where they're hitting the ball with their head all the time. Boxers have a much higher incidence of Alzheimer's than the general public. So try not to fall down and hit your head, okay? Stroke, that can increase your risk. High blood pressure in midlife. Now, most of you I'm going to call midlife, all right? Okay. And high cholesterol in midlife increases your risk. So you're going to begin to see what some of the things I'm going to tell you need to do to prevent it. Whoops. Low education level. Why do you think a low education level would be a risk factor for Alzheimer's? Think about that a minute. Pardon?
Slides for learning.
Pardon?
Goes back to your first slides of showing the brain how
The more you learn, the more connections you have. The more connections you have, the more you can afford to lose. So it looks like, now, my father graduated from high school, but he did not have a low level. He had a low level of education, but not of learning. He continued to learn, he continued to read. So I'm not saying, you know, someone who hasn't graduated from high school is going to get Alzheimer's. But I'm saying that if you don't keep your brain mentally active and learning, you don't grow any more of those connections. So the more connections you grow, the more you can afford to lose. This is brand new research. They're finding that people with type 2 diabetes have an increased risk of Alzheimer's. And type 2 diabetes is skyrocketing in the US right now, probably because of poor diet and a sedentary lifestyle. What's that? That is sitting and watching TV. That is not moving. And here again, this is a big problem with our culture. We are much more sedentary than our ancestors ever were. We don't have to go out and hunt our food. In fact, you can even have it delivered to you. Yes. You know, there are a lot of myths out there about the human brain. You've heard some of them. Have you heard that you only use 10% of your brain? That is not true. I don't know where they came up with that. Have you heard that people are left-brained or right-brained? They're not. That's not true either. You have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, but they're connected. All right?
Don't you use one more than the other if you're an artist?
Well, they are specialized. All right? Your left hemisphere handles language, more linear kinds of things, while the right hemisphere is more global, more artistic, etc. But you cannot just teach something to one half of your brain. It goes immediately from one to the other. Another myth is if you drink a lot of water, you'll have higher test scores. That's not true. I tell teachers if you drink a lot of water, the kids will go to the bathroom more. That's about all you're going to get. But my favorite one is this one. Every drink of alcohol kills 50,000 brain cells. Now think about that. How would they know that? Do you open up a brain and count the cells, drink some alcohol, and then count them? I think someone made that up to try to keep kids from drinking. And it doesn't work. They don't care whether they lose brain cells or not.
I'm wondering if learning through work, you said keeping your mind active, but if you're learning through work and you're constantly doing something new at work and learning something new, but it's sometimes under stress, does that have the same impact as if I was just reading a book for pleasure and learning for pleasure?
Okay, so she says, her question is this. If you're constantly learning something new, which is good, but you're under stress doing it, no, that's bad. I'm going to show you a little bit. Stress is a killer. Stress is a killer. And I'll tell you why. So that's a very good question, right? There was this teacher who decided to teach her kids the evils of alcohol. So she brings in 2 glasses, sets them on her desk. And this one has water in it, and this one has alcohol in it, okay? Jack Daniels, okay. So then she opens up this little plastic bag, and she takes out a worm. She puts it into the water, and the worm swims around, and then she takes it out and puts it into the alcohol, and it shrivels up and dies. And she says to the kids, okay, now what does that prove? Well, boy in the back row says, if you drink alcohol, you'll never have worms. Yeah. So, you know, it was only about 30 years ago that we began to be able to see inside a brain and look and see what's going on. And so when we don't understand things, we make up things that sound reasonable to us. Well, I can't remember this, so I must only be using 10% of my brain. Or I don't want kids to drink, so I'm going to tell them that every drink of alcohol kills 50,000 brain cells. Now, there's a caveat there. Alcohol does kill brain cells in the fetus before it's born if the mother drinks too much. It's called fetal alcohol syndrome, and it's the leading preventable cause of mental retardation in the US today. There is one other period during development when the brain is particularly vulnerable to alcohol. Anyone have any idea when that might be? It's not for you. Adolescence. Yeah, because in adolescence the brain goes through tremendous changes. And at that time it is more vulnerable to alcohol and drugs than it was earlier or would be later. Okay, but none of you are adolescents, so you can enjoy, and I'm going to tell you that wine is okay. And I don't say that because we live in Napa. It really is. Okay. All right, so now there's a lot of things that can cause you to lose your memory temporarily. Anxiety. All right, really worried about something, high anxiety. Fatigue, extremely tired, not enough sleep, your memory will suffer. Actually, this is interesting. Every person in this room needs 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep a night. All right, and you can't make it up with naps, and you can't make it up on weekends. And one of the things they've discovered is that when you are asleep, your brain keeps making the connections you made during the day and reinforcing them. Sleep is called consolidation. Your memories are consolidated. They are firmed up while you're sleeping. So 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep is very, very good for your brain. If you're deprived of sleep, if you don't get enough, fatigue, your brain didn't have a chance to strengthen that memory, and you'll find you have a memory loss. What did I do yesterday? You know, kind of thing. Stress. We have this system in our body that's a really neat system, and it saves your life. It's called the fight or flight response. All right. Now, it was in the brains of our ancestors when they lived in caves and on savannas. Back in those days, stress was caused by saber-toothed tigers, okay, or enemies coming at you. So the brain developed this system that when you are in danger, it's going to help you out. all right? It's going to release something called cortisol, a chemical. And that will cause your heart to start beating faster. It will cause your lungs to start producing more oxygen. Why do you need more oxygen? To run away from the tiger, all right? Blood flow will increase to your hands and your feet and your large muscles. So maybe you could strangle the tiger, you know, if you can't run away from it, because your hands would have extra strength. So this cortisol is going to help you survive. Now, as soon as you're out of danger, the cortisol levels go down. But when you are in this fight or flight response with this chemical flowing through your body and your breathing is increased and your blood flow is increased, your digestion stops. Because you do not need to be digesting breakfast when potentially your lunch, okay? So your digestion stops when you're in fight or flight. So does your immune system. Now, normally, everyone has all these cells in their body that fights off bad bacteria. Did you know you all have cancer cells? Everybody does. Everybody has bad bacteria. But if you have a healthy immune system, it recognizes them and gets rid of them. But when you're in fight or flight, that system stops, all right? The main thing is, I gotta save this person's life. I'm not gonna worry about their immune system right now. I'm not gonna worry about digestion right now. Now, when you're out of danger, they all start working again. But what if you keep yourself in stress all the time? What's gonna happen? Your immune system's not working, and you get sick. And the cancer cells take over. So when I say stress is a killer, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. It's a natural system that was supposed to save you at this moment in time. It was not a system designed to help you out when you're in prolonged stress. So if you're in stress and over a long, if you've got a job that has you in stress all the time, get out of it, because it's a killer. All right. So, stress, mild depression, alcohol abuse. Well, I didn't have very many drinks last night. And why were you on the floor? You know, yeah, you'll forget your memory. Isolation. We're going to see in a little bit that one of the ways to delay Alzheimer's is to be a social butterfly. We are a social people. Because you go back again to the savannas, did you have a better chance of survival in a group or by yourself? In a group. So our brain says, get other people around you, form groups, have friends. All right, so isolation can cause it. Grief, you know, when you're in grief. Low thyroid can cause you to lose memory. And medication side effects. All right. So I think probably you all know that if you go to one doctor for one thing and another doctor for another thing, be sure and take a list of all your medications, because sometimes they don't work together. So symptoms of Alzheimer's. If you can't find your car in the parking lot, that's not Alzheimer's. I do that all the time. It's because you didn't pay attention to where you parked it. However, if you get in your car and you can't find your way home, you better worry. Okay. Inability to recall recent conversations or events. Now this is called aha. Let's say I can't find my keys, and I'm looking everywhere for them. And then I find them in a place I did not usually put them. Oh yeah, I remember. Aha, yeah, of course, I remember putting them there. If you can't find your keys, you finally look everywhere and you find them and you don't remember having put them there, that's a problem. Do you see the difference between those? Yeah. Okay. If you can't remember having put them there, oh yeah, that's right, I came in the door and I put them down there instead of where I usually do. That's called the aha moment. If you don't have an aha moment when you find the keys, better begin to worry, because you don't remember at all having put them there. Difficulty with organization and problem solving. Now all of these, we have all of these. It's the degree of difficulty in finding the word. or it never does come to you. So my son picked me up at the airport one day, and we're driving from San Francisco back to Napa. We go by this billboard, and it has a movie actor on it, and neither one of us can remember his name. But my son said, I think his first name begins with a K. Well, that's interesting. And I think his last name begins with an S. Why do you think that? He says, I don't know. That's just what I think. So all the way home, we keep trying. I know now, just forget about it, and it'll come to you. So get home. About a half hour later, my phone rings, and he says, Kiefer Sutherland. I will tell you, when you can't find something, let go of it. Your brain will continue to look for it. Any of you work crossword puzzles? Okay, if you get to a place where you can't get any more clues, put it down. Come back an hour later, and you'll have more of them. The brain continues to hunt for them. All right. Now, if 2 years later we can still not remember Kiefer Sutherland, that's a problem. Okay. So here's what's normal, and here's what's cause for concern. Forget the day, but remember it later. We all do that. But if you find yourself in a place and you don't remember how you got there, that's cause for worry. Normal. Can't find the right word immediately, but it comes to you later. All right? That's fine. If you call things by the wrong names, then you begin to worry. Can't remember what this is called, and cannot remember. Doesn't come to you. That's a concern. Normal, misplace your glasses or remote, not a problem. But if you find the remote in the refrigerator, that could be a problem. Okay, whoops. You feel tired of work, family, and social demands sometimes? Anybody in here ever have that? Yeah, that's fine. We all do. But if you can't keep up with hobbies you like, and you don't want to spend time with other people because of changes, that's cause for concern. Normal. You have your own ways of doing things and get grumpy when you're derailed. You can ask my grandchildren who are sitting in the back of the room if I'm like that. I am terrible that way. I have things and I like them done certain ways. That's fine. But if my routine has to change, as like it did after the earthquake, you adapt. If you can't adapt to change, then it's a concern. All right? So, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, my husband's sister and brother, she was concerned that he was beginning to forget things and it didn't seem to her to be normal. So I suggested that they go in and get a check. Now, there's no brain scan you can do at this point to see if a person has Alzheimer's. It's this is what they do. This is the test they give you, all right? If you don't know the year, season, date, or month, that's a sign. Don't know your address. Now, what they'll do when you come into the doctor's office, they'll have you name 3 things in the room: clock, chair, TV screen. Okay, got those 3? And then they will come back a half hour later and ask you what they were. Most people can still remember them. If you can't, that's a sign. Can't count backwards by 7. I have trouble with that one. I can do it from 7 to 1, but when it gets higher, I have a little problem. Can't spell a word backwards. And strangely enough, cannot say no ifs, ands, or buts. People with Alzheimer's cannot say that phrase, no ifs, ands, or buts. And this is interesting. They'll show you a simple geometric shape. It may be a triangle or rectangle, and you have to copy it. People with Alzheimer's cannot do that. So this is the test that a doctor would do. Okay. So what have we learned from current brain research that can help us? And the most amazing thing we've learned is something called neuroplasticity. Now, neuro means mind, plasticity means malleable. Okay. The brain you're born with is not the brain you're stuck with. you can change your brain. In fact, this is the only organ in the entire body that is changed by its environment. What you become, who you are, what you can do is dependent on your environment. So let me give you an example. Back here in the back of the brain, right back here, you have two lobes. They're called the occipital lobes, and they handle vision. They're what allow you to see. You have 300 million brain cells back there. And as soon as a baby opens his or her eyes, they begin to be activated. All right. But what would happen if a person were born blind? What do you think would happen to those 300 million cells? It's a use it or lose it brain. So what we always thought, or what the scientists thought, is those cells just faded away. Okay? They atrophied. But that's not what happens. It's as if the brain says, not going to be used for vision. This person's blind. So I'm going to become an auditory cell or a tactile cell. They literally change their function based on the environment. Can't see. This is why people who are born blind have more acute hearing and tactile sensation. When a child is born, any child, anywhere in the world, their brain is already hardwired for 7,000 languages. The sounds, they're called phonemes, the sounds of the language, and the ability to pronounce them. That's in every person's brain, hardwired, 7,000 languages. Over 80,000 different sounds in those 7,000 languages. But what happens is the sounds the baby hears over and over and over in its environment. If it's English, what's that going to do to the connections for English? They'll get stronger and stronger and stronger. But the baby doesn't hear the connections for Japanese, so what will happen to those? Weaker and weaker and weaker. By 7 years of age, that ability to pronounce the sounds of all the language in the world is gone. You can learn a second language as an adult, but it's highly unlikely that you can speak it without an accent, and it is much, much harder. I just presented last week at a big bilingual conference in Albuquerque. 2,400 people, my biggest audience ever. And these are all bilingual teachers. And my job was to tell them, what are the benefits of being bilingual? They're huge. They're huge. I wish I were. I speak some Spanish, but I'm not fluent. You know, it is an enormous help to the brain to be able to speak more than one language, because you have to switch back and forth languages. Well, that seems to help people with problem solving and decision making. There are cognitive benefits aside from the fact that people who are bilingual make more money in jobs than people who aren't, and the cultural advantages of being able to keep your culture along with the language. So that ability. So a adult Japanese speaker does not hear a difference between L and R. They don't hear that. It's not in their language. But a baby Japanese, up till 3 months, does hear the difference. And how do they know? They have this little apparatus. Baby has a pacifier, and they play sounds. And when the sound is different, the baby sucks faster on the pacifier than they did before. So there'll just be this microphone. They'll go, oh, and the baby hears the difference. By 4 months, they don't hear it. Why not? Because all they've heard is their parents speaking, and they didn't distinguish between L and R, so they didn't hear it. So this brain can become almost anything. You know, we aren't just raising kids, we're creating their brains by what we give them to do and the experiences they have. So the environment literally shapes your brain. Now, what that means is, in terms of Alzheimer's, is you can build up what they're calling cognitive reserve. What is that? More connections. So in the environment, you take in more, you learn more, you talk more, you do things differently. Brain loves anything novel, all right? You will build up enough connections that maybe you could lose some and not have it affect your mental. So cognitive reserve is what we're looking for. So the key is prevention. Keep your heart healthy. Now I could ask you, what have you heard about keeping your heart healthy? Well, everything you've heard about keeping your heart healthy keeps your brain healthy. It's exactly the same thing. Now, your brain operates on two different substances. One is oxygen. Got to have oxygen. You can go a month without food. You can go almost 2 weeks without water. You can go 4 or 5 minutes without oxygen before you die. The brain's got to have oxygen. But it doesn't produce oxygen. And your brain uses 10 times more oxygen than any other part of your body. Well, oxygen comes from the lungs. So how does that oxygen get up to the brain? Through the bloodstream. So if you put 2 fingers very gently on either side of your windpipe, you should feel your heart pumping oxygen up to the brain. It's called your pulse. If you can't feel it, maybe you should get up and run around the room a little bit. Okay. All right. The second thing your brain operates on is called glucose. It's a simple sugar, not licensed to eat lots of candy. Okay. It's the glucose you get produced in your liver from a healthy diet. Your brain uses 25% of all of the energy produced by your body. This is a little bitty organ up here. It only weighs 3 pounds. It is the greediest organ in your body. It is greedy. It wants tons of oxygen and tons of glucose. Well, the only way to get that up to your brain is through these 2 arteries here, called the carotid arteries, one on either side of your windpipe. Now, what if you eat a diet that's too high in cholesterol and trans fats? What happens to these arteries? They get clogged with plaque. And then you don't get the proper amount of oxygen and glucose. And if a little piece of plaque breaks off and gets stuck, that's called a stroke. All right? So what we're learning about the heart is really important for the brain, because the heart is what is getting all the nutrients and oxygen and glucose up to the brain that it needs. Exercise. Now I'm going to say this 200 times tonight, so get used to it. If you ask me one thing you can do to delay the onset of Alzheimer's, I'm going to tell you a lot of things. But the major one, the one thing, is going to be movement, more oxygen. That's going to be the key. Okay, this is a little technical, but it's fun. You have a structure in your brain that's called a hippocampus, which in Latin means seahorse. Somebody must have thought it looked like a seahorse. Now, this is a rat's brain. But I want you to know that rat brains are just like human brains. They have all the same structures. And a brain cell, if you look at a brain cell in a little petri dish, you don't know where it's from. It could be from a giraffe or a human or a rat. They all look the same. Now, obviously, our brains are much more complex than a rat, but they operate the same way, on glucose and oxygen. So this is a test for memory. The hippocampus is what helps you form new memories and retrieve old ones. You have one in each side of your brain, and so does the rat. This is called a PET scan, and the colors show how active it is. So in the top one, you see a lot of activity. It's a very healthy hippocampus. In the bottom one, not so healthy. What do you suppose the difference is? The 2 different rats. One's got a really healthy hippocampus, can remember how to get through the maze. The other one's going to have trouble. What do you think the big difference is in the environment for these 2 rats?
Diet and exercise.
Exercise. Yeah. I'll show you the rats here in a minute. So when you exercise, this hormone is released in your brain. It's called BDNF, brain-derived neuronal growth factor. There will be a test on that later. You don't need that. The researchers call it miracle grow for the brain. It is a chemical that is released when you exercise, and it helps your hippocampus work much more efficiently and helps you remember information. So here are rats. Up here in the upper left-hand corner, this is called an impoverished environment. We have one rat in a cage all by itself. No exercise wheel. Now, this rat is well fed, is kept clean, it's well cared for, has water, all right, but it's all by itself. Next case, we have 3 rats. This is a social home because rats are as social as humans are. They're happier if there are other rats around. But that's it. They are well fed and they have water and they have this one little house they can climb in and out of. That's better than this. But better still, these are little dishes that spin. They're exercise. And unlike humans, rats love to exercise. Okay, they crave it. So if you put anything in they can run on, they hop right on it. Okay? So that's another. So this environment is better than this one, and this one is better than this one. This one has social and exercise. But the best of all is called an enriched environment. Now, an enriched environment for a rat is they get toys. And the researchers who did this were experimenting to see if they would bring in different things for them to climb on and different things to do, if it would increase the number of connections in their brain. That's what they're looking for. Well, they didn't know how often to change the toys. So first of all, they changed them every hour. And the mother rats ate their babies. It's called stress. Too many new toys, too fast. They finally figured out that about every 2 or 3 days you change the toys, and the little rats run to the front of the cage to see what the new toys are going to be. Now, all these little rats are sacrificed, and they take their little brains out, and then they slice them really thin, and they put them under a high-powered microscope. Which rats had the healthiest hippocampus and the most connections? Enriched environment. All right, so I want you to take just a minute at your tables. What is an enriched environment for us? What do you think an enriched environment is for us? It's not being put in a cage and given toys, okay? I'll tell you that. What do you think it is? I want you to seriously think about this. I want you to seriously think about what would be an enriched environment for you? What do you need? What would be an enriched environment? I'd like you to give that some serious thought over the next few days. You know, do I have an enriched environment or do I have a really dull, boring life? Is there any way I can enrich it? Is there anything I can do? Well, I'm going to give you some hints on what you could do. Take a class. Now, congratulations, everybody who's here tonight. You just start growing a whole bunch of new connections. I tend to lecture. Okay? Join a book discussion group. All right? And listen to the different viewpoints and be able to defend your viewpoint on the book. It can be fiction, it can be nonfiction. It will serve 2 purposes, social and mental. Work puzzles. Now, caveat here. I have a brother. He's 5 years younger than I am. He works the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning in 15 minutes. And he tells me he's exercising his brain. And I said, no, you're not. Anyone who can do the New York Times crossword puzzle in 15 minutes has all the answers memorized. Okay, so crossword puzzles are fine, and Sudoku, as long as it's still challenging. But if you're an expert at it, don't brag about it. You're not helping your brain. Play strategy or memory games. Strategy or memory games. And this is the one that's really getting a lot of attention. Learning a second language as an adult is very hard. It's very hard. I started my speech last week in New Mexico with a story. I was given a bilingual class when I was 50. And it was half the kids were Spanish speaking and half were English speaking. And they asked me if I would teach this class, and I would keep them. It was first, second, third, and fourth at a combination class. And by the end of 4 years, they were all to be bilingual and biliterate. And I told them I thought that'd be wonderful, but I thought it'd be a great idea if they had a teacher who was bilingual. I didn't speak Spanish. Well, it turns out they couldn't find anyone. This is a long time ago. They could not find a teacher who was fluently bilingual. So would I please take the class? They would give me an aide, full-time aide, who spoke Spanish, and they would give me 6 weeks of high-intensity language training in the summer before school starts. Now, when is the prime time to learn a second language? Birth to 5, not 50. Okay. So Sophie, my aide, she saved my life. I'm going to school 4 nights a week trying to learn Spanish. So one day, Sophie and I have the kids out on the playground, 30 of them, and we're giving them the president's physical fitness test, where they walk a balance beam, the jump rope, and you check them off. Well, we get to jump roping, and 28 kids passed, 2 did not. 2 6-year-old boys, little boys. And they just didn't have the gross motor coordination, but I felt sorry for them because everybody else had passed. So I said, Sophie, take the rest of the kids somewhere on the playground. I'm going to keep these 2 and teach them how to jump rope so I can check them off. Well, that was a great idea, except when she left, I realized I had no idea how to teach them to jump rope. I don't think they could, all right? And the other problem was neither one of them spoke any English. And I've had a whole 2 months of Spanish. So I get this brilliant idea. I'm just going to have them jump without the rope. And while they're jumping up and down, I'll sneak the rope in real fast. And technically, they will have jumped rope. And no one will know the difference, and I'll check them off. See, I think this is brilliant. Now I have to tell them I want them to jump without the rope. And I have to tell them in Spanish. It took me a little bit, but I finally came up with a sentence. And I said, ahora niños, primero vamos a brincar sin ropa. Now, I will translate for those of you who don't speak Spanish. What I thought I was saying was, ahora boys, ahora niños, now boys, first thing, primero, vamos a brincar, we are going to jump, sin ropa, without the rope. Well, that's fine, except in Spanish, ropa is not the word for rope. It's a word for clothing. And they went screaming off across the playground. My aide's favorite question was, what did you say this time? I'm sure I was the subject of many interesting dinner conversations where the kids would say to their parents, guess what the gringa said today? Learning a second language is hard as an adult, but it's one of the best things you can do for your brain. Keep at it. I'm looking for an app that'll teach me. Debate. Discuss topics. We've got an election coming up. There's a lot to debate right now, and I will not get into that. Learning a dance. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to be expert. You may have to give up a little comfort to try and line dance and, when you stumble all over yourself, but it helps your brain. Write your memoirs. One of the things that happens in our culture is we go old and we die and grandkids come along and then those kids come along. Nobody knows what your life was like. My dad sat down and hand typed Hunt and Peck on an old typewriter, 5 pages. And I treasure those of what life was like when he was a little boy. Yeah, write your memoirs. That's good for your brain. Pursue hobbies and passions. Now, how many of you have heard of luminosity? Don't waste your money. Of course, when this research comes out with all these people getting Alzheimer's, companies are they're going to make money by giving you a game that will train your brain. Brain training games. There's a lot of them. Luminosity is just one of them, a very popular one, and they are making big bucks. What the research is showing is that you play a particular game, and you'll get better at that game, but it doesn't transfer to real life. So you are just paying to get better at their games. It's not improving your memory, all right? So don't waste your money on brain training games. Okay, yes?
Can I clarify? If I'm not into playing video games or playing things on my phone, but if I was to do that and maybe switch from one game to a different game, is that I was entertained by it? Is that okay? But
Yes, yes. Any game you play on the computer, unless you're just totally addicted to it and don't do anything else in life, yeah, that'll change your brain. That's good.
Versus sticking with the same one.
Right.
Or is it challenging enough to stick?
Well, it has to. Here again, it has to be challenging.
Okay.
Has to be challenging. And when you get too good at it, find something else. Yeah. Just watch the amount of time you spend on it. This is just people with bigger social circles are shown to have more cognitive reserve. The larger your social circle, the better. However, if you are kind of an introvert and you don't like great big social circles, make sure you have 3 or 4 good friends and spend time with them. The research is really bearing it out that if you have a large social circle, your cognitive reserve goes up, probably because you talk to them and care about them. Okay, prevent stress. Now, alcohol's okay, but not in excess, okay? 1 or 2 drinks a day, that depends on your body weight, etc. All right? Lose weight, sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. Learn to relax. This is a hard one. We have very busy lifestyles. We're managing families and kids and jobs and so much stuff. Find a trick. Every time I come to a stoplight, I take my hands off of the wheel and do deep breathing. Just a little thing like that will help you learn to relax, all right? As I said, stress is a killer, and I'll show you that in a minute. Try to keep your blood pressure down. If you lose weight, if you're overweight, and you lose weight, your blood pressure will naturally go down. Keep diabetes under control if you have it. Don't smoke, and exercise. Now, you don't have to go to the gym and do like, I went to a gym once and all the instructors didn't have any bones in their body. They could do anything, and I couldn't do it, all right? I got a Fitbit, and I try and walk 10,000 steps a day. I'm not doing great aerobic things. I find myself parking farther from the store so I get some extra steps in. I find myself going up and down the steps in my house more often, all right? That's good for you. This is just a motivator. You don't have to have it. But find something that you like to do. Find a time of the day, walk the dog, walk with the kids. Exercise, exercise, exercise is so important. Less intense activities not associated with reducing the incidence of Alzheimer's. Bowling. Yes, question.
People that have low blood pressure.
What about people with low blood pressure? I'm one of them. I have extremely low blood pressure. The doctor told me, she said, I have never said this to anyone before, but would you please put more salt on your food? Now, most of us, they say, cut back on the salt because it increases blood pressure. People with low blood pressure, it's just genetic.
But that will increase the risk of Alzheimer's?
Doesn't see, no, let me say, I've not seen any research on it, but I do salt my food. I try and keep my blood pressure up as high as I can get it.
She's asking is high blood pressure, it will give us a bigger chance of getting Alzheimer's.
Yes, high blood pressure will, but not low.
So are they equal? They're equal.
Yeah. Yeah, high blood pressure does increase the risk, but not low blood pressure. Okay. Golfing, especially if you ride a kart. TV viewing. Yeah, I don't care what you're watching. Don't watch so much of it. Okay? I just read that the average American teenager between the ages of 13 and 18 is involved with some sort of electronics, TV game, 9 hours a day. 9 hours a day.
Now at school, they're all plugged in.
That's not school.
Outside of school?
Outside of school.
Should add another 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, depending on how much they're using. Now, I don't take my iPhone away from me. Okay, I depend on it. It's the amount of game playing and texting when they're not watching where they're going or when they're driving. It's the amount of time they spend on it that turns out to be detrimental. We did a workshop on the impact of media on the brain. Maybe we could do that again sometime, Barbara. Yeah, because there's a lot of research out on what is the correct amount of media, you know, from magazines and newspapers to, you know, games and et cetera, that is good for kids and bad for kids. All right, there's some, okay. So what about medical therapeutics? Is there any medicine out there you can take? Well, as soon as someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they will immediately give them Aricept, or Remenil, Alexon, or Cognex. They will delay the symptoms a little. They do not work very long, and they're not a cure. So at this point, and I want you to know that pharmaceutical companies are spending millions of dollars so they can get a patent on something and make millions of dollars to cure Alzheimer's, and no one, with all of the money they're putting into it, has come up with anything. However, what about nutritional therapeutics? So I went to this full-day workshop on this subject. These are people at the University of Florida, and they don't have, well, no one's doing research on foods because you can't get a patent on natural subjects, so nobody's spending money to do. But this is a university, and they decided to see if food had any impact on Alzheimer's. So what they did was they created these mice. They're called transgenic mice. You can give mice an Alzheimer's gene, and you can raise a whole, what do you call it? A flock, a herd of mice, anyway, a big group of mice. All of them have Alzheimer's, okay? Now they have this big tub of water, and it's milky. You can't see in it. Mice hate water. In this big tub of water, there's a platform submerged just under the surface about an inch, but you can't see it. It's just about this big around. So they put this mouse with Alzheimer's into the tub, and it swims all over and accidentally lands on the platform. Take them out, put them back in again, and what will they do? Before they have Alzheimer's, they'll swim right back to that platform. So here's how they measure. They're going to take these mice and give them different foods to eat and see if it impacts how long it takes them to remember or how soon they forget where the platform is. Does that make sense? Okay. What do you suppose one thing helped the most, delayed the Alzheimer's the most? You're going to like this one. Coffee. Caffeine. Caffeine. The equivalent of 3 to 4 cups a day delayed the onset of Alzheimer's in the mice more than anything else. So that's why people, chocolate, of course you've got to measure that against the amount of fat in chocolate, but chocolate has caffeine, all right? Alcohol and wine also delayed the onset of Alzheimer's. Berries and walnuts. Now all nuts, but walnuts seem to be the best. Your blueberries, raspberries, those kinds of berries. I put a cup of blueberries in my cereal every morning, you know, based on this. It's a little bit that will help.
They're frozen, like in a smoothie. I saw that they were like, or fresh as.
Yeah, I use frozen. I don't think it makes any difference whether the berries are fresh or frozen. It's the chemicals in the berries. Beta carotene, which you find in carrots, and the miracle food is sweet potatoes. Lots of sweet potatoes have lots of carotene. Sweet potatoes are a miracle food. They're good for you versus white potatoes. Of course, because you can almost eat sweet potatoes without anything on them, but I don't like potatoes without butter. So, okay, olive oil, canola oil, grapeseed extract, curry. Now, it's not the curry so much, it's the spice, turmeric. So sprinkle turmeric on your food. Make whatever you're eating curry. Some of these others you can only get at health food stores. Melatonin is a natural substance. You can buy it at the health food store in pill form. It's what causes you to go to sleep at night. And if your brain's not creating enough melatonin, you can take some, and it's helping some people who have sleep problems. They take melatonin. Yes?
I've been hearing a lot about coconut oil lately.
Coconut oil, I take it. Yeah. It doesn't have any taste, although for cooking I still use olive oil over coconut oil.
Is there a certain amount that they think?
I take a tablespoon of coconut oil a day. Get a real high grade one. Can't hurt. I'm not sure. Pardon?
Fish oil? No.
What kind?
Fish.
Fish oil. That one does not appear to hold up as much as they thought it would. The fish oil. The omega-3s are good for you, but you're a lot better off eating the fish than you are taking the capsules. So when I say the research isn't holding up on fish oil, it's not holding up so much on the capsules, but still eating high oil fish is good for you because you're going to get a lot of this. Okay, so these are all potential protectors. Okay? Mediterranean diet, we're hearing more and more and more about people who eat on a regular basis the Mediterranean diet have less Alzheimer's than people who eat like the rest of us do in the US. Green leafy vegetables, nuts, berries, and beans, whole grains, fish, wine. Limit red meat. And very sadly, the research that just came out from the Food and Drug Association, anything that's cured, stay away from it. That means my very favorite bacon. Stay away from fast food as much as you can. There's not very many fast food restaurants that are offering healthy food. You know, anything once in a while is fine. Anything once in a while. You don't have to go whole hog, but stay away from it as much as possible. Okay, I want to finish up with one of my favorite books. This is a young man named David Snowden who was looking for a research topic. And he heard that this group of nuns, sisters in the Order of Notre Dame up in Minnesota, lived longer and had less Alzheimer's than the general population. He thought that was kind of interesting. Now, he's in his 40s. Someone said the other day, I know why they live longer. They're not married and they don't have kids. Not true. Okay, so he gathered 678 nuns. And at the beginning of the study, they were 85 to 104. So these are elderly nuns, 85 to 104. This study started about 20 years ago. The book is a report on the first 10 years of the study. So every year he's going to give them short-term memory tests, long-term memory tests, and keep very close track of their lifestyle. Why is it they live longer? Why is it they don't have as much Alzheimer's? That's what he wants to find out. Second year of the study, he realized he had a problem. You can only definitively define Alzheimer's by what? Autopsy. So he had to tell these 678 nuns they had to donate their brains to him when they died. And the part of the book where the nuns discuss it is worth reading the book. It is so cute. And they agree, because they can help other people. Okay, so this one nun is 94 years old, and she's sharp as a tack. Not a sign of Alzheimer's at all. She dies of a heart attack. When her brain came into David Snowden's lab, he thought they'd made a mistake. She was a stage 6 Alzheimer's, worst case scenario. This is going to throw his whole study off, right? This can't be. So he goes back and takes a look at her lifestyle. And here's what he found out. She had walked 3 miles every day of her life. She had 3 degrees, a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. She taught until she was 90. Not a recommendation. And she appeared never to have had any stress in her life. And they can tell, you know, if you've had a little mini, you know, they can tell by looking at the brain. So prayer, meditation, whatever it was that helped her keep the stress. And he said, what she did was she delayed her Alzheimer's till after she was gone. If she had lived a few more years, she may have been, 39% of these nuns had Alzheimer's and never showed it when they were alive. 39%. So why do you think this happened? It's lifestyle. It's lifestyle. When she retired from teaching, she went to this home for elderly nuns, and she got them started on playing bridge and chess. And the only, can you guess what television show? They only watched one TV show. Jeopardy, where they tried to answer the questions before the contestants. And he said, and look at the results. And he said, it made me make some lifestyle changes as well, seeing what had happened to these women. So until the puzzle of Alzheimer's disease is solved, the best thing we can do is to take as good a care of ourselves as we can, to eat right, to sleep, to get exercise, to keep our brains mentally alive. And I think that's good news. I think that's good news because those are all things that we can do. So what I wish for all of you is that you all delay Alzheimer's till after you're gone. Thank you.